Hello and welcome to Parashat Vayetzei. And the Alshech HaGadosh uses this parasha to give us a masterclass in Bitachon, in trusting Hashem. And we're going to deep dive straight into chapter 30. And when you read these Pesukim, you feel that this is sheds a very bad light on Rachel, on Leah, on Yaakov. And there's got to be much more to this than we meet at the surface. So let me just read you some of the Pesukim so you can understand what I'm referring to. It says that Rachel saw that she didn't have any children to Yaakov, and she became envious of her sister. Bitachon Rachel be'achota. And she said to Yaakov, "Give me children, otherwise I am dead. Havali banim ve'im ein meta anochi." And not only is this phrase really bothersome to hear, but listen to Yaakov's response. Yaakov becomes angry with her. I thought we should never become angry. And he says, Tachat Elohim anochi, am I instead of God, am I the one that's withholding the fruit of your womb? It's not from me. It's almost like saying to Rachel, it's not my fault, it's your fault. And this feels on the surface such an insensitive response. I mean, I just can't believe Yaakov is giving that response. And so then Rachel gives Yaakov her maidservant Bila, and she conceives actually two sons. So let's just try to understand what's going on here. And the Alshech really is brilliant at this and explains it in the most magnificent way. He says that firstly, why is it that Rachel is jealous of her sister? And what is this about? Give me children, otherwise I'm going to die. The Alshech says that Rachel understood that there was something going wrong, because here we are, Leah has 4 children, her maidservant has 2 children, and Rachel has none, and she feels that there's something wrong here. So she feels that, she says later on, Daneni Elohim, that God judged me. What is he judging her for? But she thinks that God is judging her, and as a result of that, she's childless. And it's like she feels like it's a punishment, and that is why she's envious of Leah. Why is she envious of Leah? Because she feels that, is it possible that the sin that I created, which was to give my sister Leah as a wife to Yaakov, maybe withholding myself from a week from Yaakov, because he married then Rachel a week later. That week was a punishment, because I created a suffering to Yaakov in deceiving him. And why was she jealous of Leah? Because she said, listen, I admit I was an accomplice to that deceit, but Leah, she was the one that really undertook the full deceit by coming in instead of me. And yet she has 4 children and I have none. So I don't understand that. Maybe Rachel thinks it might be that the sin that I created caused enmity within my husband Yaakov, and because of that he's not praying for me, and because of that I'm not having children. And Yaakov goes to her, "You have done nothing wrong. Don't feel that your mistakes are hindering your childbirthing abilities. You've done nothing wrong." And the proof to that is that you have no mitzvah to have children. It's me that has the mitzvah that has the children. And if there was a sin involved here, then Hashem would have denied me children. But as you can see, I've got children. And so don't think that it's because of your sin. You have no sin. The fact that you have no children at the moment, that's Hashem's cheshbon. It's not my cheshbon, and it's not down to me. Not that you don't feel that my lack of praying for you is the cause of this. And how can we understand Rachel's point that if you don't give me children, I'm dead? Interestingly, the Alshech says that there are three things that take us away from this world. One is envy, one is desire, and one is honor. And Rachel is saying, listen, I feel jealous of my sister because she has four children, I have none. And I know that if I don't combat this jealousy, the jealousy will become injustice. I would feel injustice and I would feel like I've been punished, and therefore I will feel like I'm dead, because envy removes somebody from the world. So that's how we can understand Rachel's comment. And Yaakov says to her, there is no difference in your heavenly reward whether you have children or not. Your reward is guaranteed anyway. And so Rachel gives Yaakov Bilhah, and she gives birth immediately. And from that, Rachel feels that Hashem does not judge her anymore, because He gave her a son through Bilhah. And if there was any judgment, the judgment has been paid by the fact of Rachel not having children, and now she can look forward to having another child. But instead of her having a child after Bilhah, Bilhah has another child, and Rachel thinks, well, maybe I've miscalculated this. I think I should have had a child by now. And so Rachel is saying that, wow, it could be that what I thought was an averah was actually a mitzvah, that in fact my succumbing to the natural womanly feeling of wanting to be exclusive to her husband and giving Leah to Yaakov, overcoming that allowed me to gain favor in Hashem's eyes, and through that chesed, He's given me a second son, Naphtali, she called him. And the idea of Naphtali is that I prevailed in my test. I overcame my test. And she's saying that, it must be in Hashem's desire that this whole incident happened, because as a result of that, I did give Leah first to Yaakov, and I prevailed. And as a result of that, my prevailing, because we know that God doesn't give people tests unless they can have the ability to overcome them. That was Rachel's proof that it's all divinely inspired, this whole incident. So now let's go to the second passage that we're going to study, and this is the passage of the Dudaim, which again is perplexing, because on the surface reading of it, we see that everybody is cast in a negative light. But through the Alshech, he explains it all. So let me just read you through the Pesukim. It says like this, that after Naphtali was born, Leah saw that she wasn't giving birth anymore. So she gave her maidservant Zilpah to Yaakov, and she had two children from him, Gad and Asher. And then it says that Reuben went out in the time of the wheat harvest, and he found some dudaim. These are fruits that enhance a woman's ability to give birth, to have children. So he found them in the field, and he brought them to Leah, his mother. And Rachel saw this, and she says, "Please, Leah, give me some of your son's dudaim." And Leah says something really remarkable. She says, "Not only have you taken my husband, you want my son's dudaim." I mean, it's just, I can't imagine these conversations happening. And then what's really bothering Alshech as well is Rachel seems to be agreeing with her. Yes, and because of on the count of me taking your son's dudaim, Yaakov will lay with you today. And and then Yaakov comes from the field in the evening, and Leah goes out to greet him and says, "You must come to me tonight, because I've surely hired you with my son's dudaim." Which, again, what kind of language is that? I mean, this is Leah Imenu, and we learn that, and it says, the pasuk, it says that Yaakov slept with her by Laila Hu, and there's a big significance in that. and she was granted a son, and his name was Issachar. So how do we unravel all of this? To explain this, the Alshech brings a beautiful midrash regarding Shlomo Bar Yochai. He says that a woman and a man came to him, husband and wife, and they wanted to get a divorce. And Rav Shlomo Bar Yochai says to them, the same way you had a party for your wedding, I want you to have a party for your divorce. I want you to celebrate this moment in the same way, with wine and food and everything. So they have an evening, and they bring wine and food, and they celebrate the fact that they're going to get divorced. And the husband gets completely drunk, and he says to his wife, take whatever you want from our house as your ketuvah, as a part of your ketuvah. And then he zonked out, he crashed out. And in the morning, he wakes up and he sees that he's in his wife's father's house. And he says to her, what am I doing here? And the wife says to him, well, you told me last night to take the most valuable thing that I could find, and that was you. That's what I really wanted. And they come back to Rav Shlomo Bar Yochai with this story, and he says to him, wow, because you love your husband so much, may Hashem bless you with children. And she then had children, because up to then they didn't have children. So it's a beautiful story. And the Alshech brings this to show that really what was motivating Leah was not this sort of bickering between sisters. What she wanted to do as Rachel was all she had her mind on is, I've got to play my part to produce 12 tribes out of Yaakov. And even though I've got 4 children already for myself, and Zilpah gave another 2, I want to contribute as much as possible because I love Yaakov. And to prove to him how much I love him, I'm going to show him that I've given up all the dudaim. Rachel only wanted some of my dudaim. I'm going to give her all of her dudaim because I'm not going to rely on nature. I'm not going to rely on the dudaim to have more children. Instead, I'm going to rely on 3 main things. The number one, I gave my shifcha to Yaakov when I stopped giving children, and this is chesed showing that I'm not interested in just another night with my husband. I'm interested purely in building up these 12 tribes. Otherwise, I wouldn't have given my shifcha. That was the first thing. The second thing is that out of the kindness of my giving away the dudaim to Rachel, I'm showing kindness to Hashem on that basis. Perhaps He will bless me with children. And the third thing, she said, Balaylahu, she understood that there was something very powerful that night. And what was it? The Alshech brings, he says, I can't find any proof of this anyway, but I really believe that this is the truth, and may God bless me that I am right. And he says, that night, and that is why we're referred to at this time, that the Reuven went out at the time of the reaping of the wheat. When is the time of reaping of the wheat? Is Shavuot. That night was Erev Shavuot. And Leah's desire was to be with her husband, her Chatan, and to be with the Shekhinah, because that's the time when the Torah comes down, and to produce Torah. And it's fascinating that that very night, Leah, after many years of not giving birth, was able to have a child, and his name was Issachar. Issachar with 2 shins, because it's Yesh Schar, and Yesh is 310, and the sages tell us that learning Torah, you get 310 gates to heaven. And Issachar was born, and he's the pillar of Torah learning of all the tribes. And it's because of Leah's giving out of herself to be able to have the privilege of being with her husband on Leil Shavuot that he was born. And then we hear that and yet another son was born to Leah, and another daughter. So Rachel had to wait 3 more years after her toying around with the Dudaim before we hear the beautiful words, and I'll read it to you. God remembered Rachel, and she gives birth to Joseph. And it took. What does it mean that Hashem remembered Rachel? It was only then that Rachel learned the lesson that it's not because of her sins that she wasn't allowed to have a child, and it was not because of her reliance on the Dudaim or natural factors. The only reason she has a child is because of the grace of Hashem. And having learned that lesson, Hashem then blesses her with a child, Yosef. And I wanted just to remind you that this Tuesday, we're delighted to speak about the practical implications, of which there are many, of this week's parasha with Riva and Muna Seidel, and that'll be this Tuesday at 7 o'clock. I look forward to welcoming you all there. But I just want to leave you with one more thought, and that is that it's very interesting that the Alshech brings out this conversation that after the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, all the Avot plead with Hashem to forgive Bnei Israel for their sins. And Avram comes, and Yitzchak comes, and they all come, and Moshe comes, and Hashem's not budging until Rachel comes, and she says, just as I overcame my jealousy and gave over my husband to Leah, so you too, Hashem, may you overcome your strict justice and anger and forgive the Jewish people. And the Alshech suggests that Hashem manipulated events in such a way to bring about this test for Rachel, and the fact that she passed it was the merit on which God forgave us for the Beit HaMikdash, the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash afterwards. So that's the wrap up for this week's learning. I hope you enjoyed it, and look forward to discussing that with Riva Seidel on Tuesday at 7 o'clock. Please join us for that. In the meantime, have a wonderful week, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week. God bless. Take care. If you like this wisdom, please subscribe to my YouTube channel and stay up to date.